You want to be part of the video? Say hi. Hey buddies, it's Dylan. Welcome back. As many of you know, the Albaz Strike Structure deck got released not too long ago. I would have made this video sooner, but I actually haven't been able to go to locals for the last little bit due to weather, and I got COVID for a little bit. But I'm feeling good now, I'm back, and we are making a video on this structure deck. So for those of you who don't know, the Albaz Strike Structure deck is a structure deck that got released around the 14th of April, and it includes support cards for Tri-Brigade, Dogmatica, Spriggans, and Sword Soul, not to mention all of the branded or Fallen of Albaz cards. Now, when this got released and I saw the list, there were some really great things about it. There are some amazing reprints in this deck. We've got Ghost Ogre, Effect Veiler, Dark Ruler No More, There Could Be Only One, and it's just overall a lot of great reprints, as well as some very good archetype-specific cards, like Branded Fusion. I'm sure if you've been to a locals in the last couple weeks, you've probably seen somebody use Branded Fusion. I had one issue with this deck, though, and it's that it doesn't feel like a complete deck. Now, when I say this, it's because on the back it says Tri-Brigade, Dogmatica, Spriggans, and Sword Soul. But then when you look at the list, there's in reality one Spriggan card in the main deck, one Dogmatica card in the main deck, and that's Fleur-de-Lis. That's not even Ecclesia or Nadir Servant. And then the same goes for Sword Soul. There's only one Sword Soul card, really. And obviously we get the new Tri-Brigade Mercourier. So when I saw this deck, I thought, yeah, there's a lot of great reprints and a lot of strong cards, but how does it perform on its own? And that is what I decided to do this week. I am getting 3 of these Albaz Strike Structure decks, I am putting them together, and I am seeing how well they can perform at my locals. Before we get into the rest of the video, I'd like to thank our sponsor, Fusion Gaming. Fusion Gaming is the #1 card shop in our city, Winnipeg, Manitoba, and their online store provides such easy access for people not only in the city, but people in Canada to get their singles and sealed product. If you guys want to support the channel and support our local OTS, please head on over to fusiongamingonline.com and use code TheBuddyForce6 for 6% off.
Fallen of Albaz is pretty much the heart and soul of this deck, mandatory 3 of. When it's normal or special summon, you can discard 1 card and then fusion summon from your extra deck using monsters from either field as fusion material, including this card. The one downside to this card is that it can be ogred. Well, obviously it can be veilered and impermed, but ogre really hurts it just because it goes to the grave, which means you can't actually fuse anything. Next, we run 3 Keeper of Dragon Magic. So I'm sure if anybody here has been keeping up with the branded cards, everybody knows about Aluber. Aluber is a Despia card. Keeper of Dragon Magic is basically a worse Aluber, where when it's normal or special summoned, you can discard a card and then add 1 Polymerization normal spell or 1 Fusion normal spell from your deck to your hand. So this allows you to get Branded Fusion to your hand, you just have to discard a card. It's also got a second effect where you can reveal a fusion monster in your extra deck and special summon one of the materials mentioned on that card face down in defense from your graveyard, and then you can only summon fusion monsters for the rest of the turn. But I think I ended up doing that once, but the only reason I did it was to wall up because they stopped its first effect. For the new cards, we're running 3 Spriggans Kit. Spriggans Kit, if you have a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material on your field or in your graveyard, you can special summon this card from your hand. When this card is normal or special summoned, you can add to your hand 1 of your branded spell or traps that is banished or in your deck or graveyard, and then you have to place 1 card from your hand on the bottom of the deck. This card's really good. It's a nice extender. It's another normal summon that lets you get out Branded Fusion because, as it said, you can get a branded spell or trap from your banished, your deck, or your graveyard, so literally from anywhere. Then we're playing 3 of the Tri-Brigade Mercourier. This is, I guess, the first hand trap that you're running in the deck. When your opponent activates a monster effect while you control a fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material, you can send this card from your hand or face-up field to the graveyard to negate that effect. if this card is banished, you can add from your deck to your hand one Fallen of Albaz or one monster that mentions it except Mercurier. This card's actually really good. It really just was another hand trap. The banish effect came in handy a couple times, but you were mostly keeping this in your hand as a hand trap. Next, for the rest of the hand traps, we ran 3 Ghost Ogre and 3 Veiler. Then for the last of the monsters, all the one-ofs, we ran 1 Albion, the Shrouded Dragon, 1 Chaos Dragon Legionnaire, 1 Dogmatica Fleur-de-Lis the Knighted, 1 Starliege Seifert, and 1 Brotar. What you ended up doing most of the time as your opening play, if you had Keyword Dragon Magic or something, you would use Branded Fusion to send Fallen of Albaz and Starliege Seifert, and that was because later on you could dump either the Albion or the Legionnaire into the grave, and then you could use Seifert to add it back, which I did do a couple times, and it was very nice to get a Legionnaire onto the board. So that is it for the monsters. On to the spells. We're playing 3 Pot Extravagance. So, funnily enough, I ended up siding out at least 1 or 2 copies almost every single game because Pot Extravagance in this deck kind of sucks. You'll see the extra deck later, but we are running mostly 3 ofs and 2 ofs, and still I ended up only banishing maybe 3 cards instead of 6 off of Extravagance, and it just felt very risky. There were times where I did banish like 2 out of my 3 Albions from the extra deck, and I had a very rough time those games. Next we have Branded Fusion. This is the new fusion that everybody's going crazy over. It allows you to fusion summon 1 fusion monster that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material from the extra deck using 2 monsters from your hand, deck, or field as fusion material. And then you cannot special summon monsters from your extra deck except fusion monsters the turn you activate this card. Obviously Branded Fusion, everybody knows how good it is. Easily a 3 of. Then we're running 3 Branded in White. Branded in White is pretty much an invocation, or that's how it works when it comes to fusing monsters, where you can fusion summon a fusion monster from your extra deck using monsters from your hand or field as material, including a dragon monster. But if you're using Fallen of Albaz, you can banish monsters from your graveyard as material as well. It's also got a second effect that I don't think I ever used, where if this card is sent to the graveyard because it was there to activate the effect of Fallen of Albaz, ergo the discard 1 card to fusion summon, then you can set this card back to your field during the end phase. I don't think I ever used that. I did end up siding out maybe 1 of these each game as well. You kind of need to run 3 because it is a fusion spell and you really need to see your fusions, but it wasn't super great, so I'd end up probably taking 1 out just for some of my side cards. Then we played 1 Branded Lost. This card's really good. It's sort of like a Meltdown, where the activation of your cards and effects that include an effect that fusion summons a fusion monster cannot be negated. Also, your opponent cannot activate cards or effects when a monster is fusion summoned this way. Also, if you fusion summon a fusion monster, you can add 1 Fallen of Albaz or 1 monster that mentions it from your deck to your hand, and then you can only use either effect once per turn. This came up a good amount. One thing I do want to mention though, I think I made this mistake during one of the games. You cannot, your opponent can still activate Ash even if you have this on the field. So if you have Branded Loss on the field and you activate Branded Fusion, your opponent still is able to activate Ash because Branded Loss only negates the activations. That is something that I did not know at the very beginning, and just want to make sure you guys know as well. And then for the last spell card, we've got 1 copy of Called by the Grave. Hey, and onto the trap cards. Not a lot here, so we're running 3, there can be only 1. The deck doesn't care too much about types. It just stops you from doing a couple plays and like sort of extending or going overkill, which is fine. It's mainly here to stop your opponent because you can sort of play with that disadvantage, and you just need to hope that your opponent cannot. And then the last 3 traps, we've got 1 Branded Retribution. It's their counter trap, and it's when a spell/trap card or monster effect is activated that includes an effect that special summons a monster. You can either return to the extra deck a face-up fusion monster you control, or 2 fusion monsters in your graveyard that mention Fallen of Albaz, and if you do, negate the activation, destroy the card. It's also got a second effect where you can banish this card from your graveyard to add a branded spell or trap in your graveyard to your hand. That is probably the part that I use the most. I think I actually used the first effect of Retribution maybe once or twice. A lot of the times I was finding a way to dump Retribution into the grave in order for me to get my Branded Fusion back to hand. Next we got Branded Sword. I think I maybe resolved the first effect of this once, and it's banish any number of branded spell or traps from your graveyard, special summon that many Ice Blade tokens. They end up being level 8 with like 2500 attack, so it's pretty beefy. And then you can banish this card from the graveyard to target one of your banished monsters that either is Fall of Albaz or mentions it, and add it to your hand. This comes in, the second effect came in handy as well, just to help you in the grind game, start recurring some of your cards. And then last we have Screams of the Branded. I never resolved the first part of this, I believe, and it's if a fusion monster was sent to your graveyard this turn, special summon one of your fusion monsters that is banished or in your graveyard. And then during the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard because it was sent there to activate the effect of Fall of Albaz this turn, you can set this card. I don't think I resolved either of those effects throughout both of the tournaments. Okay, moving on to the extra deck. The cool thing about this structure deck is that in one structure deck, it gives you 6 cards for the extra deck, which means if you buy 3 of them, you actually have more than you can fit in an extra deck, which is, I don't think has actually ever happened for any other structure deck. So let's just get right into it. 3 Mirror Jade. This is the card that everybody is going crazy over. You can only control 1 Mirror Jade, the Ice Blade Dragon, and once per turn, as a quick effect, you can send 1 fusion monster from your extra deck to the grave that mentions Fallen of Albaz as material, and then banish 1 monster on the field. Then it can't use that effect the next turn, and it also has another effect where if this fusion summon card in its owner's control leaves the field because of an opponent's card, you can destroy all monsters your opponent controls during the end phase. Obviously, a really good card, 3k attack, banishes any monster non-targeting, and you get to send one of your branded fusions or one of your Fallen of Albaz fusions to the grave, which then triggers their end of turn effect. Next we have Albion. Albion is the one that you go into most in order to get into Mirror Jade. It requires Fallen of Albaz and 1 light monster. Its effect is when it's fusion summoned, you can fusion summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, except Albion, by banishing fusion materials mentioned on it from your hand, field, and or graveyard. So what you end up doing is you'll use Branded Fusion, send Seifert and Albaz to make Albion, and then you'll use Albion effect, banishing the Fallen of Albaz and Albion to make your Mirror Jade. It also has the effect where during the end phase, if this card is in the graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can add to your hand or set a branded spell or trap directly from your deck. Definitely a really good second effect that I get used a lot. Triple Lubellion did not use this card as much as I thought I would. I thought this would be the one that I was going into most, but that just wasn't the case. Mainly because it has the same effect as Albion, where on Fusion Summon you can Fusion Summon a level 8 or lower fusion monster from your extra deck, blah blah blah, except instead you shuffle the materials mentioned from the field, graveyard, or face up banished. The reason that I didn't find myself going into this too much is mainly the fact that in order to do that fusion summon, you have to discard a card, and I always felt very low on cards in my hand whenever I was playing, mainly because I would end up opening up multiple hand traps, and I just didn't feel like discarding anything. And then if you use the effect to fusion summon with this card cannot attack, and you can't special summon monsters from the extra deck except fusion monsters. Not a huge deal. Then the rest of the cards are 2-ofs. So we run 2 Brigand. It requires a Fall of Albaz and a level 8 or higher monster. Can't be destroyed by battle, which is good. And then while you control this fusion summon card, your opponent can't target other monsters you control with monster effects. That didn't come up necessarily, but it is nice to have this card, mainly for its grave effect, where if it's sent to the grave during the end phase, you can either special summon or add a Tri-Brigade monster or Fallen of Albaz from your deck. So you could send Brigand and then search a Courier, and then you get a negate. Next up, we have 2 Sprint. It requires Fallen of Albaz and 1 effect monster that was special summoned this turn. I don't think I went into Sprint. Maybe I went into it once and I just can't remember. During your main phase, you can move this card you control to another one of your main monster zones, and then you can destroy all other face-up cards in this card's column. And then during the end phase, if this card is in your graveyard because it was sent there this turn, you can then add or special summon a Spriggan's monster or 1 Fallen of Albaz. This was a nice way to get kit. You could special kit on end phase and then search out a branded fusion. And then lastly, for our extra deck, we ran 2 Titaniclad. This is probably the one that I went into most, other than Albion and Mirror Jade, mainly because it gains a lot of attack. So it requires a Fallen of Albaz and then a 1 monster with 2500 or more attack. It then gains attack equal to the combined original levels of the monster that you used for it. So if you send Albaz and a level 8, it gains 1200. You got a 3700 beat stick. It then also is unaffected by the activated effects of any other monsters special summoned from the extra deck the turn it is fusion summoned. And then if it's sent to grave, during the end phase, you can add or special summon a Dogmatica or Fallen of Albaz card. That's it for the extra deck, and I'll show you guys what I was siding as well. For going first, we had 3-dimensional barrier. It actually went really well, especially in the mirror. The mirrors were probably one of the scariest matchups for me, just because I know that they're just playing my deck, but better. They've got Albaz, they got the Despia cards. I need as much advantage as I can, and D-Barrier helps me with that. If I can go first, set a D-Barrier, and make my Mirror Jade, and then my opponent can't use D-Barrier, that works for me. It also is very nice when your opponent goes into Verte, you let them activate Verte so that they pay 2k, and then you flip over D-Barrier, which is also very nice. The only other going first card that I was playing was 3 Waking the Dragon. Believe it or not, this did come up a couple times. People would pop my back row, and I'd be able to use Waking the Dragon. I could summon out a Mirror Jade, I could summon out whatever I needed, and it was nice. I definitely think it's kind of cool that this card was included in the structure deck, and it did come up a few times. Now for all the going second cards, we run 3 Thunder King, the Lightning Strike Kaiju, 3 Radiant. Nice for going second, be able to get some of your opponent's negates off the board, because obviously with this deck, you sort of only have 1 line of play, and if your opponent negates that, you're SOL. So you gotta hopefully draw a Kaiju if you're going second, and be able to get rid of one of their negates. Sometimes you can play around 1 negate, it all depends on what's in your hand. And then lastly, to also hope that, we have 3 Dark Ruler No More. This is really good if your opponent makes an established board, Dark Ruler No More, negate it, you can make your Mirror Jade, and hopefully take the game. So that is the deck that I used. I went to 2 different tournaments. We went to the Tuesday night Yu-Gi-Oh! Locals at Fusion Gaming, and then we also went to the Thursday night Locals at Play and Trade Winnipeg. I will be showing you guys some of the replays, and I will recap what happened at those events.
Hey, this is post-production, Dylan. Originally, I was going to put both the 4 rounds for Fusion and the 4 rounds for Play and Trade, but as it turns out, that would make the video very, very long. So I'm going to split this video up into 2. So this video will just be about the Fusion tournament, and the next video will just be about the Play and Trade tournament. Okay, on to the recap. So first we'll be taking a look at how I performed at the Fusion Gaming tournament. This was on Tuesday and went for 4 rounds. Full disclosure, I honestly hadn't read most of the cards in the deck prior to this tournament starting, so I definitely make some misplays and misread a couple of my cards. Everyone gets a pack of OTS 18 for entry, and I did end up pulling Alti Zeus, which was pretty nice. First round we played against Salamangrate. We won the die roll and chose to go first. We normal summon Keeper of Dragon Magic and use it to search Branded Fusion. We then go into Albion and then Albion effect to make Mirror Jade. On that we pass turn. Our opponent bricked pretty bad, so all they were able to do was negate Mirror Jade using Chalice and set to pass. On our turn, we summon Kit to search Branded Fusion, use Branded Fusion to make a Brigand, and attack with our monsters for a total of 7,300 attack. Looking back, I could have made Titaniclad to go for game. Didn't matter too much though, as on my opponent's turn, they summoned Gazelle, which was negated by Effect Veiler. They turned the Gazelle into a Balings and chained Parallel Exceed. I chained Mirror Jade effect to banish the Banelings, meaning the Exceed couldn't summon, and that was game 1. Game 2, our opponent went first, and with Flame Buffalo and Exceed in hand, they were able to end on a board of Lingaribo and Baguska with 3 set cards. This wasn't too much of an issue for us, as we opened one of the Kaijus that we sided. With the Baguska gone, we normal Keeper, but it gets Chaliced. We attack over the Lingaribo, set 1 card, and pass. Our opponent attacks over our Keeper with a Kaiju, normal a Ghost Bell to link into a Verte, and then makes DPE. Now, this is the funny part because he uses the DP to pop Verte and our back row, which in fact was a copy of Waking the Dragons. Using Waking, we summon Mirror Jade and banish the DPE. Unfortunately, this wasn't enough because our opponent top decks the Circle to grab Gazelle and then pops off to make Transcode Update Jammer, which is more than enough for game. Game 3, I went first and used Pot of Extrav to banish 3 and draw 1. This gave me a Branded Fusion and I ended up on Mirror Jade and D Barrier. My opponent had a much better opening hand than before, opening Spinny, Circle, Exceed, Chalice, Fusion Destiny, and DD Crow. They were very easily able to break my board. They ended up using Transcode and Update Jammer to make Access Code, which meant it could attack twice with 5,300 attack for game. Round 2, we went up against Eldritch. We won the die roll and got to go first. This time we banished 6 and drew 2 cards. I can't remember what they were, but I think one of them was There Can Be Only One. We activate Branded Fusion, sending Albaz and Ghost Ogre to make the Albion, and then Albion effect to make Mirror Jade. We set the Tikaboo and pass turn. Our opponent played the Blackstone to special a Golden Lord at the beginning of his turn. He sets 2, and on end phase, I use Mirror Jade to banish his Golden Lord, and flipped up my Tikaboo as well. By sending Spring, I was able to special Kit and get a search for Branded Fusion. On my turn, I used Branded in White to make a Titaniclad and Branded Fusion to make a Brigand. Not to my luck, when I summoned the Brigand, my opponent chained Torrential Tribute and wiped my field. I then normaled Starly Seyfert, and when I declared an attack, my opponent chained their Haquero in the back row to block it. The whole my attacking and my opponent chaining a monster trap to block goes on for a couple of turns until they realize that I had banished both of their Golden Lords, and they proceeded to scoop. Game 2, my opponent goes first and uses Duality to add a Cursed Eldland to hand. My opponent ends his turn with 3 sets, Cursed Eldland, and a Lingaribo. We start our turn by using Extrav to draw 2 and normaling Albaz. When I use Albaz effect, my opponent chains Super Poly to make Starving Venom Dragon with the Lingaribo and Albaz. I use Branded in White, banishing Albaz and the Ogre that I discarded to make Albion, and then Mirror Jade. I then use Branded Fusion, sending Shrouded and Albaz to make Titaniclad with 3,700 attack. We proceed to Kaiju the Starving Venom, and now we are back to Monster Trap blocking when I try to attack for game. My opponent uses Eldritch effect on his turn to pop my Mirror Jade, and then also sets a Haquero before passing turn. On my turn, I use Branded in White to make another Mirror Jade, as my opponent concedes the match, giving us the win for round 2. Round 3, we played against Branded Despia. This was the match that I was definitely the most worried about, because they are basically playing our deck, but better in every single way. We lost the die roll, so my opponent went first. They start off by activating Branded Opening, discarding Edge Imp Chain to special Aluber. The funny part is that even though we're practically playing the same deck at its core, I had to read pretty much every single card he used because I'm not using any of them. I had to double check what Aluber said, I double checked what Edge Imp Chain said, and I also had to read Branded Opening and Branded in Red. Aluber gets negated by my Effect Veiler, and they search Patchwork with Chain. Their end board ends up being Lubellion and Aluber with one set because I had a second Effect Veiler for the Lubellion. My turn was even worse, as I normal summon my Keeper of Dragon Magic to search Branded Fusion, but my Branded Fusion gets ashed. I attack over their Aluber, which didn't matter at all because on their turn they just normal summoned another one. They then use Branded Fusion to make Albion into Masquerade, and finally, a Fairy Tale Snow makes an appearance since it was sent there to make Albion. This concludes Game 1. Game 2, I start with Branded Fusion, that ends me on a Mirror Jade and a set Tikaboo. My opponent will opening into Aluber, into Lost, and then activate Fusion to go into Lubellion, into Mirror Jade. Did I also mention that he got a Mercurier in hand because of Branded Lost? Well, he did, and he destroys my Mirror Jade, which during the end phase also clears his board. On the end phase, I used a Sprint effect in Grave to summon Kit and search, but that was met with a Crossout Designator. On my turn, I use Branded in White to make a Titanic Clad, which is met by a Branded Red that ends on a Lubellion, Mirror Jade, and Dragostapelia, because Ad Libitum was banished for the Lubellion. Luckily, the Titanic Clad is unaffected by monster effects of monsters summoned from the extra deck for the turn, so I was able to attack into the Mirror Jade to get rid of it. My opponent didn't end up having any follow-up, so we spent the next couple turns attacking into his monsters and eventually attacking for game. Game 3 was short and sweet, with my opponent going first. He starts opening Aluber, Fusion, Lubellion, Mirror Jade, send Albion to banish Aluber, and then setting a Branded in Red off Albion. On my turn, I activate Branded Lost, to which my opponent uses Branded in Red to make a Guardian Chimera and pop it. I normal Albaz and use the effect, but Mirror Jade banishes the Albaz, which ends my turn and the game. Here we go, last round at the Fusion Gaming Locals, we played against Sky Striker. We run the die roll and opted to go first. We opened with Pot of Extrav, milling 6 to draw 2. We then normal summon Kit to search out the Branded Fusion. Fusion gets us into Albion, then Mirror Jade. I set 2 and pass turn. My opponent on his turn uses Cosmic Cyclone to banish Screams of the Branded, then uses Hornet Drones to go into Hayate. In battle phase, I use Mirror Jade to banish the Hayate so he doesn't get the dump. In main phase 2, he normals Rose into Kagari and Kagari gets Effect Veilered. He'll link it off into Shizuku and set one before going to end phase and activating Shizuku, effect to search, but luckily I also had a Mercurier in hand. It passes back to me, and all I do is attack over the Shizuku and deal some damage with my monsters on board. Turn passes again, and my opponent uses Rhoda to grab Ray. He will use Imperm on my Mirror Jade before summoning the Ray. Even though the Mirror Jade is negated, I still activate the effect and send Albion for cost. He links Ray into Hayate, and this time the attack goes through and sends Engage to Grave. Main phase 2, Hayate turns into a Gagari, adds back the Engage. Engage searches an Afterburner, which is used to pop the Mirror Jade and my back row. Mirror Jade's second effect activates, which will destroy the Shizuku that he link summoned. Shizuku, before getting destroyed, will search a Shark Cannon. Still in the end phase, I banish my Branded Retribution, which was popped by Afterburners, to add back the Branded Fusion. On my turn, my opponent shotguns a D-barrier, calling Fusion, obviously, which pretty much turns off my whole deck. I activate Shrouded Dragon from hand to send Branded Sword to the grave and draw 1 card. I then use Branded Sword's grave effect to add an Albaz back to hand from the banished zone. My opponent on end of main uses Ray effect to go into Kaina to stop my kit from attacking. On my opponent's turn, he Shark Cannons to summon my Mirror Jade, but doesn't realize he can't use his banish effect, since he doesn't have any of the proper fusions in his extra deck. So he links Kaina and Mirror Jade away to make Dark Charmer and summon my Mirror Jade again, and links those off into Unicorn and bounces my Branded Lost away. He attacks over my kit, sets 1, and passes for turn. The first thing I do in main phase 1 is summon Albaz and use effect to fusion summon. This is met by Imperm, which is fine because I had the Branded Fusion in hand already, Omega lol. Lubellion is made because all of my other Albions were banished, 2 off Extrav and 1 off of the Albion effect itself. I was able to shuffle 1 back though, thanks to Lubellion, to make Mirror Jade. Mirror Jade effect to send Sprint and banish Unicorn and also end the game. Game 2 was kind of a misplay for me because I sided to go second, but my opponent made me go first. I activate Lost and then use Fusion to make Albion, then Mirror Jade. Lost also adds me a Mercourier before I pass turn. My opponent activates Cosmic Cyclone on his turn, then he uses Hornet Drones to make a Hayate. On attack deck, I use Mirror Jade to banish the Hayate, but he chains Ghost Ogre to the Mirror Jade. But then again, that's why we added Mercourier. Mercourier stops the Ogre, so I get my banish of Hayate and Mirror Jade stays on the field. Main phase 2, he sets 2 cards, and on the end phase, Albion adds a Branded Fusion to hand. On my turn, I summon Levianeer and use the effect to pop 2. He chains a D barrier called Fusion, and then I attack for 4800 before passing for turn. This was enough to finish the game because on draw phase, my opponent bricked. Overall, we finished Fusion Locals going X2. At this point, I'm feeling a lot better about the deck. I think there's definitely things that I still didn't know, but I felt a lot more confident, especially for Play and Trade, which was 2 days later. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and if you did, please make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Once again, thank you to our sponsors Fusion Gaming for sponsoring this video, and I hope you all stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you next time.